Hello and welcome to the Creative Academy, the Blue Pencil section, where we take a look at your pages and offer you some thoughts, feedback, and suggestions. I'm Eileen Cook, and I'm here today with my colleagues, Crystal and Donna, and we are taking a look at Carole's piece, which she initially indicated when she sent it to us, both fiction / nonfiction. But Donna, you were saying you have some insight into what this piece is. Can you tell us a bit?
I do have a little insight. So what Carole submitted, which you'll read below, is a letter home to her mom. And this has come out, so one thing that is possible that this piece is, it was suggested to Carole during one of the Nano Mastermind groups that to help her move from all of the academic research she has about these seafaring women who she absolutely loves the stories of into writing fiction, she try writing some letters home to kind of get into that headspace. And so is that enough context? I think that is. So these are a little bit of these were proposed to Carole as an exercise to make that switch from thinking of them academically to thinking of them as a story.
So my first thing for Carole is you are now going to embrace, this is historical fiction, baby. That's what you're writing. You have tons, obviously what comes through is so crystal clear for me is the research that you have. So that would certainly come up in a query around the knowledge base that you have. But you are writing fiction. That's where we are. So starting off, do either of you have sort of some initial thoughts on this piece? This is a letter home. The character is one of these seafaring women, and she's sort of talking about how she ended up on this ship and some of the things that are happening.
I want to know a lot more about what's going on because there's so many like juicy little tidbits that are dropped in the letter. Like there's even just the second sentence. I have left the house of Mrs. Lincoln. Her husband was not good to me and wanted to bed me. Upon leaving her employ. So we're already gone, but I'm like, okay, wait, what happened there? Who is Mrs. Lincoln? Why was she there? What just happened? Like, you know, was she a housekeeper? Like, what did that look like? Was it scary for her trying to escape? Where was that located? Like, I have so many questions, which is good, but I feel like as a scene written in a story, you could elaborate on all of those things and kind of let us follow that journey along with that character.
And I guess for me, one of the things that went off, and it could be because I'm a dual citizen, but when I saw have left the house of Ms. Lincoln, I'm wondering if we were talking about Abe Lincoln. And then I was like, oh no, not another president who can't keep control of himself. Like I always had such fond visions of Abraham Lincoln. So I wasn't sure if it was the same Lincoln. And just because of historical fiction having sort of, key characters, that would be something to think about. My biggest suggestion, and I loved this letter and I really enjoyed reading it because of sort of all these things, was to think about changing it from a letter to a scene. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of thing where, instead of saying, I'm supposing you're wondering what's happened to me, I left the house, show her making the decision to quit, or show Mr. Lincoln, basically coming into the kitchen and rubbing up against her and her feeling like trapped and not sure what she's going to do and just being like, screw this, I am not going to do here because it's just going to go badly. I wanted to be there.
That was my reaction through the whole letter. I read the letter through and then I thought, this to me feels like lots of letters, like every paragraph is a letter, but then it's more like, no, every paragraph is a scene that you can take us into and show us what's going on. And sure, maybe she writes the letter home to mama and it only shares that little tiny snippet. But I think what I read here was an outline for, part of the story where each one gets broken into a scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would say definite scenes, because the issue with letters, and it's something to keep in mind if you're sort of, putting them into your manuscript, is there's two things to keep in mind. Anything you communicate in a letter, the reader automatically knows things work out, because otherwise you wouldn't be around to write the letter. So it's harder to have higher stakes, like, oh my God, are they going to be okay? Because it's like, well, they must be okay because they're writing a letter to someone else after the event. So you reduce stakes a little bit. And then the second thing to keep in mind is what you might tell someone. So if I'm writing a letter to my mom, I probably wouldn't necessarily tell her all the details of potentially being sexually assaulted. So maybe, when she says her husband was not good to me and wanted to bed me, I had questions like, she's kind of skimming over that. Like, was she actually afraid she was about to be raped, or was he just creeping on her? And I don't really know, because I'm not getting this sort of thing from something else. But I cut off Crystal.
That's okay. I was going to say, there's an opportunity with the letters of what you would edit out, because it would be very unusual if you are, well educated enough to be writing letters and whatever, then there's a lot around politeness and etiquette as well that comes into play. So what would you disclose or not disclose? If I was thinking about writing a letter home to my mother, I would be all about like, everything's okay. I'm going on a slightly different adventure than I had planned, but and the interesting contrast comes in what we know is happening versus what she's choosing to tell. And that is telling a whole different story about her relationship with her mother and what society would expect you to say or not say at that time. Like, all of that other research stuff that you have, and because of all the research you've done, you're able to weave in so much commentary and so much real stuff about those other aspects of society and the pressures that those women were under to conform to a certain way of being. Or, she's going off on an adventure, but there's gotta have been a bunch of pressure to not do that. Like, women on ships was not a popular thing for quite some time. So she is, at least that's my understanding, that women were considered bad luck on ships in a lot of cases, and were not permitted aboard. So yeah, it's just an interesting thing that these are different, brave, exciting, interesting women who've gone on these adventures, which is part of what you've said you're drawn to about them. So the more you can help communicate that to the rest of us, the better, in terms of sharing and bringing it all to life.
Yeah, one thing, if you do keep something as a letter, or even if you do it as a scene, particularly in historical fiction, you often see someone be like, March 1865. Like, I don't actually have a sense of what time period that we're in, if this is the 1400s versus the 1800s. Like, I don't actually have a lot of context to know. And I think that would sort of, one, just ground us. And then two, again, because it's a letter, again, depending on who you're writing to, I just want just a little bit more emotion. So I'm just going to pick out a couple places to talk about. So one line that I loved is, she's talking and she says, the crew all got to shore and we had a terrible time as they were so drunk coming back that one sailor fell into the harbor and drowned. And then here's the line that I love. There is much that Billy and the boys did not tell when they spoke of voyages to foreign lands. Like, I just felt that little hint of irritation. Like, seriously, they couldn't have mentioned, like, they made it sound like a lot more fun than it's been. But I was curious, like, was that horrifying? Is that the first time that she's seen someone die? Like, I could see some room to be like, he's splashing and it's like everyone kind of making a joke about it, because like, how close are they at this point where the sort of voyage is just taking off, where it would be like, that's how little human life means, because the very next paragraph, the captain's going off and recruiting new people.
And I love that they're worse than useless.
Yes. There's a couple of really lovely turns of phrases where I can definitely see that Carole has the chops to write historical fiction and to just kind of plunk us right into that world. And so my biggest suggestion is just dig, dig, dig. Like, let's see these things and play them out and give us because you have some great sensory details. And I just want to feel like what it's like to be on that ship. And like, there's a scene where they're doing laundry, and it never occurred to me, but obviously they couldn't use fresh water for laundry, so everything would be that stiff and crunchy if you washed it in salt. Like, I just loved that detail. And I think those are probably the things that because you have done all this research. But there's all the riggings draped in laundry, and then the boats moving, so the laundry and the bath water, water's kind of sloshing all around. Like, those are the things, like, let's be there, let's really see those things, because they're just fantastic.
Mm-hmm. The one other piece that I think would be interesting with the juxtaposition of the scene and then letter snippets is differentiating her voice, whoever this character is, from the narrative voice of the time. So being able to dive into those descriptions, and then the choice in the letter is it that her penmanship is not great, or there's words missing, or she's misspelling things, or like, what are we learning about her voice, her level of education, her position in the world? All of that can be established by the way she writes a letter as well, really clearly, with just a short little snippet, without having to dive into this backstory dump about, you know, her whole history. But it gives us a lot of clues to work with as well, and then mixing that in with all that other great detail and stuff. And the things that she's, sorry, Donna, the things that she's noticing about her world would also be a really good clue. Like, if she's come from a nicer family where she wouldn't have been exposed to any of these sort of darker sides to humanity, if she lived a very sheltered growing up, she'd be more likely to notice certain things than others, and maybe less equipped to deal with some of them. So the things that feel like a big deal to her are going to be a really good clue to us about what her background was as well.
Yeah, I think a good example of that is one of the worse than useless people is Jimmy, who's a Black man, very nice, and lets me read some of his books. So, like, is she surprised or shocked by that at all? Like, would that be something that would be unexpected? And again, because I don't actually know the time frame, like, is he a free Black man? Those kinds of things, which would be really interesting. And I think for myself, and I love historical fiction, a big part of it is seeing how things would have been seen by characters in that time versus how we might see them now, and that contrast. So you have that realization.
I just wanted to throw in that back to the line about there's much that Billy and the boys didn't tell me when they spoke of voyages, which in and of itself, I love that as a line, but it also makes me want to know who Billy is. Like, is Billy her brother? Is Billy her cousin, or a love interest, a boyfriend? Who is or was he? And then I think, well, I want to hear, if she's going to be writing letters home to her mom, I want her to also be writing letters home to this Billy character who's had this experience, and kind of be like, what the heck, Billy? Like, and that would also be, you know, there could be a fun relationship there, that we'd learn a lot more about her. And that was something I wanted.
Yeah, funny. I automatically assumed it was a brother, and I don't know why. Like now, but when you say a love interest, I'm like, oh, that might be interesting. Like, and then how does she feel about being separated from that love interest?
The boy next door, she's been in love with her whole life. Now that she's gone off to have adventures.
And did she go on this ship because of Billy? Like, is that did he encourage her by either intentionally or just by the way he told the stories? Anyway, I just want to know who this Billy is, and I want to see that relationship a bit more.
So I think what we can say, Carole, 100%, is we want to know more about these seafaring women. So I think you're on to something that's really sharp and good and will be fun for us to read. So I would say keep going, and hopefully we'll see more of your pages here in the Blue Pencil sessions. All right, everyone, thank you so much, and we will talk with you soon. And anyone else, make sure you're turning in your pages too. And you can go ahead and wave now, Crystal. All right.
Bye.
Bye.